So here's some standard CDL restrictions. So it used to make me crazy because different states have different restrictions, and they still do. But here's the standardized ones. So the standard ones are L is air brakes test. So if the driver did not pass the actual written knowledge exam, they're going to have the L restriction. But if they have the Z restriction, that means they didn't take the exam and they didn't take the road test part. So then you have the E for manual transmissions. You have O, fifth wheel connection. M is for class B and C only. N, class C only. V is for medical variance. If they have a medical variance, that means they have a medical waiver or potentially need a medical waiver. So whenever you're hiring somebody, if you see that V restriction on their license, it means that they have some kind of medical waiver that you need to submit or you need to have copies of in order to hire that driver. So I've seen drivers that, double amputee drivers, and they can drive just fine, but what they have and what they have to provide to you whenever you hire them is that medical variance. You have to keep that on file. So it's not that they can't drive. They passed all the tests. They passed the more extended medical exam. They submitted all their paperwork whenever they got their license, and they have a variance. They have a waiver is basically what it is. So these are some of the standard restrictions, but every state, like I said, has their own restrictions. It makes you a little bit crazy because sometimes they'll just put other, and then you have to call the DMV and you got to ask them, what does other mean? What exact restrictions are on this license. So CLPs are valid for a year. This is the commercial learner's permit. If a driver has a commercial learner's permit, they can't drive any commercial motor vehicle. So if maybe they had a class B before, but now they want the class A and they've got their learner's permit while they're learning to drive that class A vehicle versus the class B, there's restrictions. They can't be driving by themselves. Just because they have a learner's permit means nothing. They have to be operating with somebody who has either that class or a higher class of license than they have. It's a learner's permit. Just like whenever you were a kid, whenever you were a teenager, you first got your license, you had a learner's permit and your mom or dad had to be in the vehicle with you at all times, right? Same thing. Whenever they get their CDL, they have certain restrictions that are placed on them. So you have the CLPs are valid for a year. Retesting requirements vary by state, but what I'm seeing now, sometimes back whenever I got my license, like I said, was a long time ago, there was no limit. I could take the written exam, and I actually did. I took the written exam, and then a couple days later, took the road test. Done. But now I see some states kind of putting restrictions on it. They're saying that you have to have that license for a minimum of 6 months or 3 months, whatever it may be, before you can schedule that road test. The whole point of that is so that they have time to actually learn how to drive with somebody who knows how to drive before you just throw them in there. And some states don't. But for the most part, all states have at least that year. So if they don't do their road test within that year, they're going to have to retest. So you can't just have a CPL for 3 years and then expect to do your written exam and then 3 years later go do your road test. That's not how it works. Typically, it's for about a year. Otherwise, they're going to start retesting you. So a CLP with a P endorsement is passengers. If you have a P endorsement, that means that you have a learner's permit for passengers, but you are not allowed to drive anything ever with passengers on board unless they're employees of the company that you're training with. So passenger endorsement, just because you have a learner's permit with a passenger endorsement doesn't mean you can haul passengers around. You can only use that for testing purposes and the kind of vehicle that you're going to be operating. So like school bus drivers say. School bus drivers don't actually train with their learner's permit with a bunch of kids on board, obviously. So passengers, just realize that you're not going to be able to be moving passengers with a learner's permit. An S is school bus. Well, I guess that's going to be an S, but school bus, same thing. You cannot be moving around with a bunch of kids on the bus while you're training. That's not how it works. Tanker endorsements, a COP holder with an N endorsement may only operate an empty tank vehicle. They cannot operate anything with like liquids in it. The whole point is for them to learn how to drive that vehicle. but they can't do anything that contain hazardous materials. So I would say if you have a CLP or a CPL, I guess I listed that wrong on there. I'm going to have to fix that. But if you have a CPL with an endorsement, definitely don't haul anything hazardous materials, but maybe put water. Just put water in the tank while you're training, because then at that point, if you take a turn too fast and you tip it over, you're not spilling hazmat materials all over the road. It's just water. So are you still going to get in trouble? Probably, but at least it's not hazardous materials. So you cannot haul hazmat with a learner's permit whenever you just get your endorsement, if you're under a learner's permit. So if you're still unclear, when in doubt, like I said, call the local DMV and get clarification on any restrictions on the driver's license before allowing them to operate. Don't just say, yep, go out on the road and I'll call the DMV while you're out there, because that could get you in a ton of trouble. And don't forget to do your road tests. Just because a driver comes in and they show you, yep, I have a Class A CDL, I've been doing this for 20 years, and they tell you all the great stuff that you want to hear, that means nothing. I have seen way too many times drivers, and I've done plenty of road tests. I've done road tests on so many guys, it's just ridiculous. So I'll go in, they'll tell me that they've been driving for 10 years. Well, I'll say, okay, get in the truck and we're going to do a road test. Just FYI, anybody doing a road test has to have, the license that they're driving or better. So if you're testing somebody with a Class B and you don't have a Class B or Class A license, you can't actually do the road test. You have to be comparable or have a higher class of license of the person you're road testing. So your office manager can't road test your drivers if they don't have a CDL, period. I get that a lot. Your supervisors, if they don't have a CDL, they can't be the ones road testing these drivers. So make sure that whoever's doing the road test, a lot of companies think that other drivers can't do road tests. They absolutely can. If you have lead drivers, a lot of smaller companies, if you're a smaller company and you don't necessarily, these large companies, they have training programs and they have tests. That's all they do is do road tests all day long. But a lot of times you may have a company the size of your company doesn't warrant that. It doesn't justify that. So if you don't have a CDL license, but you have drivers, have one of your lead drivers, have a driver that you know is a good driver that you trust, has a great safety record. Maybe have that person doing the road tests. It doesn't mean that they can't continue to drive. It just means that they're doing the road test because you trust their opinion. You know they're a good driver. They've been with you for a long time, whatever the case may be. And at least have somebody doing those road tests. And what I find more, honestly, is drivers are actually harder on other drivers than supervisors are. Drivers are very hard on other drivers. They just are. Whenever you're doing accident reviews, whenever you're doing incident reviews, whenever you're doing reprimands, anything like that, if you have another driver on the board or on the review panel, they're almost always the toughest ones for that driver, for the driver who's getting reviewed. So the same way it goes for road tests. But don't forget to do them. I've seen way too many times where a driver will say all these great things, all the paperwork looks good, everything looks fantastic on paper. So all of this does not have to be overwhelming. We actually have a software that we developed. It is DOTReady software. We did all of this because our clients asked us to. We used every software that was in the book. We used them all. None of them worked. Didn't like any of them, so I developed my own. So if you're interested in that, you can go to dot-ready.com and look at more information on that. If you want to contact us, go to DOT Readiness Group, info@readyfordot.com if you want to email me. If you go to dotreadinessgroup.com, you can actually book a free consult online. And, if you want to hear about any of our services, for one, you can look it up on the website. All of our information is there, different services we offer. But if you want a free consult, I do free 10-minute consults where I'll talk to you, figure out what I feel like you need, or based on your conversation, our conversations, and we'll kind of just go from there. I'm never going to try to sell you something that you don't need. So I definitely base it on our conversations. Also, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, follow us, subscribe, do all that good stuff. And that's it. Have a great day.